15 years. That's right, Batman Arkham Asylum is 15 years old today, but did you know that a couple of years before the release date, Batman Arkham Asylum looked very different? This version was a lot creepier and spooky. It is difficult to know exactly what went through Rocksteady's mind back in 2007, but with the help of the cutting room floor and the data miner back to life, who I've credited both in the description, we can get a glimpse of what Arkham Asylum could have been. Batman originally looked very different in the concept art that we can find on the game. Obviously, concept art does not tend to be what will appear in the final product, but it is very interesting to point out that Batman is in all black suit rather than grey. He also looks to have a slimmer build than the final game, so maybe Rocksteady took a lot of inspiration from Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. We can see this similar version of Batman for the main menu of the concept art, and if you want a rough idea of what this suit could look like, there's a very good video from Greeny that I have added to the description below. There's also more concept art, most likely further into development, that looks a lot closer to what we got in 2009, but with the twist that you would be able to add armor to it by finding caches scattered through the game. What's cool to think of is that there is actually an armored version of Batman's suit that we can get for completing the game. I'm interested to find out if this is what the final build of our suit would have been if they would have kept these caches. It is uncertain if this was going to be considered for Asylum Batman's final design, but honestly I love what we ended up getting, although Batman's face does look a lot older than he should really. The original concept art for the user interface was very different to what we got in the final game. Interestingly, there was some cut gadgets from the game mentioned, and some of the gadgets that appear in the game have different labels. The Batarang, Sonic Batarang, Line Launcher, Explosive Gel, Cryptographic Sequencer, and the beacon used in Killer Croc's lair were all mentioned in the files, but the Sonic Batarang was named UI_BatDistract, the Explosive Gel was named UI_Explosive Goo, the Cryptographic Sequencer was named UI_Decipher, and the beacon was named UI_BatTracker. Some cut gadgets to point out were the detonator, which going by the image looked like you could throw a batarang that you could then detonate using a button, which seemed to be used later with Sonic Batarang instead. The gadget labelled Forensics, which appeared to scan fingerprints, was most likely converted to be built into the detective vision that we see in the game. Another gadget was the harpoon gun, which I'm unsure what exactly Batman would use it for, but my guess is that he could have used it to create lines for the line launcher, or maybe that it was the original name for the grapnel gun. Lastly, we have the resonator, which from mainly guesswork was going to be similar to the Sonic Batarang, where it would emit a loud noise to distract enemies. Some of these gadgets are a bit redundant or looked like they were combined with other gadgets, but apparently getting these gadgets were going to be very different than just playing through the game. As I spoke about it in my earlier cut content video, Batman would have to gather a full set of one type of collectible, whether it be the Joker spray cans, Killer Croc scales, or Two-Face coins. Collecting a set would unlock a special gadget, which Batman could then retrieve from either the Batcave or the Batmobile. I'm pretty happy with what we got in the final game, and although there's not as many gadgets as its sequels, I feel like the game had a lot of diverse gadgets, and they all had a unique role in the game. The early plan for Batman Arkham Asylum's combat was very different to what we got in the final game. In an Ask Me Anything session on Reddit with Sefton Hill, a user asked Sefton about the rumours of Arkham Asylum being a rhythm combat game. Sefton actually confirms this and explains that the combat system initially started out as a rhythm action game. It was based on my love for classic Jackie Chan, Yen Biao and Sammo Hung movies. They have this lovely cadence to the combat which I've never seen done in a game. Even though we had to remove the rhythm action requirement, the core of that idea lived on through free flow. In my opinion, thankfully this was removed, as I'm not sure if this would have suited the game's style. I believe a game that was released in recent times that was going to be similar to what Sefton envisioned was something like Hi-Fi Rush, which did extremely well with reviewers. But thankfully they stuck with the iconic free flow combat, which is a core feature of the franchise. A small design idea made by Rocksteady early on was for Batman Arkham Asylum's icons to be a lot more cartoonish. These were actually snippets from the comics, I believe, and would be used for tutorials to explain how to dodge, attack, and disarm. I imagine these were just placeholders in the early stages, but I'm glad that they just went with the basic design in the final product. There's also voice lines in the 2007 build of Arkham Asylum, found by Back to Life, which confirms that at some point there was going to be some sort of tutorial levels such as Forensic, where you would have to scan fingerprints. Here's some audio files of this.
Welcome to the Batman Forensic tutorial. Batman needs to find a way to track Officer Green's movement around the cell block. Batman now knows 2 locations that should provide reliable identity evidence, probably in the form of handprints. As the DNA came directly from the corpse, we can assume it is a perfect match. The DNA leads to this cell. Ask the guard to open it for you.
Obviously it was not really needed in the final game, but definitely interesting that they planned on doing this at some point. Something that I would have really appreciated in all of the Batman Arkham games, especially now that I am a content creator, is a level select screen, allowing you to go to any main point of the game, such as a Predator section or a boss fight. Surprisingly, we can actually find images of this level select screen, but is definitely very early on, as it had levels such as Silent Predator Test Map, Combat Prototype, and Load Saved Game. I believe it was a lot better just to have a flowing story rather than levels, although it would be great to be able to just pick a certain point of the game and hop in rather than having to play it all over again. If you're enjoying the content so far and want to support me further, please consider becoming a YouTube member. Link in the description of this video where you get a heap of benefits. There were actually a couple of cutscenes of Batman Arkham Asylum that we can find on the cutting room floor. Now I doubt they were ever meant to be played in the final game and were more just of an idea of the tone of the game, but honestly they're pretty cool. Starting off, we have a man walking out of a padded cell. Sadly, there's no evidence to who this could be. The second cutscene is a man squeezing blood into a bucket. This does not seem to relate to the game at all, especially in the final product, but let me know your thoughts. Lastly, we have Scarecrow throwing blood from a bucket on a statue, the bucket most likely from the previous scene. The reason for this cutscene is unknown, but in my opinion, Scarecrow does look very different to the final release, and does look a bit like Cillian Murphy's Scarecrow from Christopher Nolan's Batman. The original story for Batman Arkham Asylum was apparently going to be very different according to storyboards and leaks. The original story appeared to be a lot more focused on a murder mystery and missing people, with Batman using his detective skills in order to solve them. One cut line from Oracle talks about how Batman only got a partial scan of a fingerprint and needs to get the whole hand.
Yes, well, for instance, we can't guarantee a successful scan with a partial print. Not enough to create a full print filter. You'll need to make sure you select a full handprint.
There was also leaked scripts of Batman's investigation of a mystery that was apparently going to be accessible in Chapter 2 of the game, and with the help of Back to Life, we can actually hear the voice recordings of this found in the 2007 build of the game. The voices of the characters were done by stand-ins before the actual voice actors came on board, and that's why Batman definitely doesn't sound like Kevin Conroy.
What can you tell me about the prisoner in cell B27? Did you notice anything strange in the cell block last night?
I wasn't on duty last night. Speak to Green. He may be able to help on that one.
Have you heard from Officer Hanrahan?
No, don't get him pissed. I had to cover his shift. I heard his wife called earlier, and when I call his cell, it keeps going straight to voicemail. He's probably sleeping off a hangover somewhere.
Can you confirm when you last saw him?
Night before last, maybe? I had yesterday off. Had to visit my daughter's school for a... Oh. I guess you're not interested in that, are you?
The concept art cutscene we viewed earlier could be linked to this script also, as the man squeezing blood into a bucket appears to be located in a greenhouse. Another clue is that the name of the file is glass_QT, which could be when Batman finds the murderer, who is revealed to be Scarecrow, who we saw throwing the bucket of blood on the statue. There's also another murder in the storyboard section of the files that depict a man running away from murdering someone from what looks like a chapel, which I will speak about in a moment. This definitely could have been an interesting side mission to have in Batman Arkham Asylum. Having to find missing people and solve murders would have been really fun to do and also suit the theme of the game, so it's a shame that we didn't get anything like this in the final build. I spoke about this in a previous video, but I think it's good to bring this up again in this one. There were a couple of cut locations in Batman Arkham Asylum. There's even a look at what the world map could have originally looked like, but this was in very early stages. Speaking of the chapel we saw in the storyboard earlier, this could be linked to the cut location of the game Chapel Rock, which was meant to be on a separate island but linked to the main island using a bridge. It was planned to have an inmate's graveyard, crypts, a chapel, and a section called Twisted Willow. It also was apparently going to be the place where the Batcave would be located rather than the main island. The next location is one that appears in the game but is vastly different to what is in the concept art, which is the lighthouse. In the final game, the lighthouse is a simple texture with no collision, but the plan for the lighthouse originally was that you could visit it using a bridge that was used to connect the lighthouse and the island. There were actually multiple images of how it could play and how it would have looked. Maybe this could have worked if the game was split up into levels, but as it became a more semi-open world game, the systems at the time probably would have struggled to have so much on screen without performance issues. For people who have stuck around for so much of the video, we actually have an early map model provided by Back to Life, giving us a glimpse of what could have been. And honestly, this is incredible to see, as I have never seen this before, so it's amazing to see what the map could have originally been. As you can see at the center of the map, we have the main island, which looks like Arkham Asylum was originally just one massive building, rather than split up into multiple sections. Beside the asylum, it looks like a greenhouse where one of the murderers fled to, with what could be a maze beside it. This most likely was where they planned to have the Poison Ivy and Mad Hatter boss fight originally in. To the left of the main island we have Chapel Rock, which is insane to see, and what's interesting is that the roof of the chapel is incomplete. Maybe the chapel was being built during the events of the game, or maybe it was damaged. It's hard to know exactly what happened. There's also a bridge, but it's actually broken in half, so maybe the chapel was not accessible until Batman got access to a gadget, something like the line launcher, to get across. Moving on to the location closest to us in the photo is the lighthouse. The long bridge to the lighthouse looks really cool, especially how high up we would have been looking down at the water. The actual lighthouse appears to have a lot more going on, as it looks like it has a building in front of it, and going by the concept art and drawings, it didn't seem to ever show up. Lastly, we have a bridge to our right, which we can assume is back to Gotham, as it does look like the bridge we got in the final game. We also have a couple of images of what buildings could look like up close, and it's hard to know exactly what buildings they could have been, but it still is really cool to see. Did you know that there was apparently 3 drivable vehicles planned for Batman Arkham Asylum that were cut from the game? The first one is pretty easy to guess, which is the Batmobile. The second vehicle that was considered was the Batwing, but as Sefton Hill said in an interview that they wanted to add these vehicles, but they felt that adding something like the Batmobile and Batwing would take a lot of development time away from what was important. Apparently the third vehicle that they planned to be drivable was the Batboat. We can actually find the quote-unquote Batboat in the Batcave that was going to be a drivable vehicle according to the magazine Xbox World. Hanging from the roof of the secret northwest Batcave beneath Arkham is a strange vehicle covered in tarpaulin. Batman's boat, which only a monster could dare call the Batboat, plays a pivotal role in the game's latter stages. It seems like Xbox World either misunderstood or were lying to their readers, as this is actually the Batwing that is under the covers. Now we all know this is not the case in the final game, as the Batboat does not appear in the game at all. But do you think this was Rocksteady's original plans, or do you think this Xbox World lying in order to draw more attention to their magazines? Overall, I love the final product of Batman Arkham Asylum, but I would have loved to have seen what the original vision was back in 2007 and 2008 while developing the game. There was actually a prototype build of Batman Arkham Asylum from all the way back in 2007, which was leaked from a Warner Brothers developer's hard drive. But sadly this is unplayable. Content that was in early development that never made it into the full release that I would have loved to have had would have to be the detective focused murder mystery missions. If they could somehow rework it to be side missions for the full release, would have been so cool to see. But let me know what your favourite bit of content you think should have been in the game. Be sure to like and subscribe. Go play Arkham Asylum on its anniversary if you haven't already. My name is Fo and Slan.